and welcome to this edition of Eye on Africa. I'm Haxi Myers-Belkin. Coming up on the show, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta wins 98% of the vote in the country's repeat election. His supporters celebrate, while the opposition, which boycotted the vote, now has 7 days to mount a legal challenge if it desires. A Paris court arrests, then releases the brother of former Burkina Faso President Blaise Compaoré, as it considers a request to extradite him in connection with the 1998 murder of a journalist. And France's foreign minister asks the United Nations to help fund a new 5,000-strong counter-terrorism force in the Sahel, in a bid to quell mounting jihadist violence in the region. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has been announced the winner of the country's second presidential election this year. Kenyatta secured 98% of votes in a repeat election that was boycotted by the country's opposition, and which drew fewer than half the number of voters that took part in August's annulled ballot. Clement Bonero has the details.
Uhuru Kenyatta, 7,483,895.
He's been declared the landslide winner in Kenya's second general election since August. Uhuru Kenyatta won 98% of the vote, with turnout at just under 39%. Numbers have dropped by 40% since the previous poll, this because he faced no significant challenger following an opposition boycott. The rerun was also suspended in 25 opposition constituencies amid security fears. Kenyatta says he's willing to hold talks with his opponents after the outcome of any court proceedings.
My victory today is just part of a process that is likely to once again be subjected to a constitutional test through our courts. I will submit to this constitutional path, no matter its outcomes.
The announcement on Monday led to some celebrations in pro-Kenyatta areas of the East African nation. In several opposition strongholds, however, it sparked small protests. Some even lit bonfires in the middle of the street.
We are not children. We are not kids. We are adults. And today we are not going to sleep. We want to sleep until we will get our rights.
Kenya's opposition now has 7 days to mount a legal challenge, sparking fears of further violence in the country. About 50 people have died in clashes since Kenyatta was declared the winner in the original poll on August the 8th.
Earlier, I spoke to our correspondent in Nairobi, Julia Steers, and I asked her if the claim by Kenya's Election Commission that the latest vote was free, fair and credible rang true.
It certainly raises some huge issues as far as half of the population accepting this vote as a fair election and a credible election. What we heard from a lot of Odinga's supporters who boycotted the vote today was that Kenyatta is not their president, that they will wait to hear from Odinga himself tomorrow, that they think of Odinga as their president, even though they boycotted the vote, even though Odinga was unable to run. So obviously, just from turnout alone, we had a turnout of about 80% during the August election, and the turnout this time was hovering around 39%. So of course, that's a huge decrease. You can see that Odinga's boycott was quite effective, even though Kenyatta in his speech tonight disputed that. He said that this turnout narrative was just a narrative that was being peddled by the opposition. The numbers really do speak for themselves. And while the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Chebukati, said tonight that he believed that they had made great strides in improving their training and making reforms from the August election that was overturned, at the same time, about a week ago, he was the same person who said that he was not sure that they could guarantee a free, fair, and credible election. So he's certainly changed his tune. He feels as though they made significant improvements over the last few weeks, but you have to remember the boycott was quite effective, and also in the 4 counties in the west that are opposition strongholds, the elections were unable to be held at all, and you had the Electoral Commission say today that they still were not going to be able to hold the elections there due to the ongoing security concerns and clashes with police. So there were huge issues around access to polls on election day, and of course going into the election there was already widespread doubt that there was even the ability for this to be a free, fair and credible election.
The brother of Burkina Faso's former president has been released by a Paris court 1 day after he was taken into custody. François Compaoré was arrested on an international arrest warrant in connection with the 1998 killing of journalist Norbert Zongo, who at the time of his death had been investigating the murder of a driver who worked for Compaoré. François Compaoré's older brother Blaise was ousted from power in 2014 after a popular uprising. The younger brother's lawyer insists this latest arrest is politically motivated.
In Burkina Faso, they know that Blaise Compaoré will never face trial. Why? Because Burkina Faso cannot mount a legal case against him. So instead, people are blaming his brother. If it's not Blaise, let's go after François. It's a perversion of justice for political ends.
Addressing a meeting of the UN Security Council, France's Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has been drumming up support for a new anti-jihadist force for the Sahel region. The so-called G5 force will be made up of troops from Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad and Mauritania. Their primary job will be to ensure security and stability in a region that faces an ongoing threat from the extremists of the Islamic State group and affiliated organisations. Let's take a look now at some other stories we're following for you from across the African continent. A protest against a package of financial reforms in the capital of Niger descended into violence on Sunday night. 23 police officers were injured and 14 vehicles destroyed after a group of protesters attempted to head to a square opposite Parliament that they hadn't been authorised to use. Police responded by firing tear gas into the crowd. Civil society protesters say the 2018 budget would effectively impose austerity on one of the world's poorest countries. 4 civilians and 1 policeman have been killed in the city of Goma in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo, on the fringes of a protest against the president's attempts to cling to power. Civil society groups say that Joseph Kabila must stand down, almost a year after his second and final term expired last December. Elections were meant to take place this year, but the DRC's Electoral Commission this month announced that there would be no vote before 2019. And an aide to Ethiopia's former communist ruler has pleaded not guilty as his war crimes trial began in The Hague. Eshetu El Amu, a Dutch-Ethiopian national, stands accused of signing orders to execute political opponents during a period in the 1970s known as the Red Terror. The charges pertain to the alleged kidnapping, torture and murder of 321 victims. In northern Mali, desertification is threatening urban environments like never before. Climate scientists say that a steadily warming planet is resulting in the Sahara growing by 6 meters every single year. The latest city to find itself in the desert's path is the ancient trading post of Timbuktu. Anthony Fouchard reports on Timbuktu's fight against the encroaching sand.
On the border of the desert is Timbuktu. This ancient city has always been close to the Sahara, but now the shifting sands threaten to engulf it, as well as the Niger River that once ran across West Africa and through the city.
If we don't do anything, we're going to lose the river because it will become full of sand. That means no more sailing, so there will be transport and communication problems. Homes will suffer too, as will the way we get supplies, because the Niger River is a lifeline for Timbuktu.
Supplies now have to be fetched from Kuriemi, a town 10 kilometres away. It has become the only place that the river reaches all year round. To protect it means finding ways to hold back the sand. That means planting.
Here we've got the grass, which is just starting to grow. None of that was there before. We made these pots that act as windbreakers and stop the sand from moving. We stopped the sand from moving, but now we're working on keeping it in one place. There are both mechanical and ecological tactics. This grass, these plants, and these trees will grow, and the roots will solidify in the sand. Hopefully, that will mean no more sand in the river.
The difference is already visible. The dune, for now, has stopped falling into the river, and soon residents will be able to begin planting for themselves.
That brings us to the end of this edition of Eye on Africa, but there's more news coming up, so do stay tuned if you can.